No one on the ranch had ever seen her touch a man, not once, not even by accident. And people whispered that her silence was heavier than words. She walked past men like shadows, calm, distant, untouchable, carrying a past no one dared to question. The strongest rancher knew her rule and respected it, believing some boundaries were carved in stone. But that evening, under a burning sky and tired winds, fate chose to test everything. Without warning, the rancher staggered, his strength fading from his eyes, his body betraying him step by step. He fell toward the ground right in front of her, breath breaking, life slipping. The ranch went silent, hearts pounding, eyes fixed on one woman. She froze, trapped between a promise made in pain and a man collapsing into death. Every second stretched like a lifetime, as everyone waited to see if she would step back or reach forward, because whatever she chose would change her forever. She was known across the ranch as a silent woman with strict boundaries, a woman who spoke little but carried weight in every step she took. She did her work with focus, kept her eyes low, and never invited questions or comfort from anyone around her. People respected her distance because it felt unbreakable, like a fence built from unseen pain, and no man dared to cross her space, not out of fear, but out of instinct, sensing a history carved deep inside her. Everyone had theories about her past, but none held the truth. She did not explain herself, and she did not need permission to be guarded. Her silence was not weakness, it was survival, shaped by moments she chose never to relive. Each morning she arrived alone, and each night she left the same way, untouched and unchanged. Tio the ranch. She was a mystery to Tio herself. She was a woman holding together what once shattered. She carried one rule inside her like a silent oath, firm and unspoken, guiding every step she took without needing to be explained. She avoided all physical contact with men, not because of fear, not because of pride, but because long ago she had made a promise that shaped her survival. That promise was born in a moment when trust had cost her everything, and since then, touch had become something sacred and dangerous at the same time. She moved through the ranch with careful awareness, always, leaving enough space between herself and others, always keeping her hands busy so no one could mistake her distance for coldness. Men noticed, but none challenged it, sensing that her boundary was not negotiable. It was a shield built from discipline, not bitterness, and it gave her control in a world that once took it away. Every day tested that promise in small ways, passing shoulders, close calls, sudden movements. Yet she never failed herself. She believed breaking it would mean losing the strength she fought to rebuild. That evening, as the light shifted and the air grew heavy, she felt an unease she could not name, a quiet pressure pushing against her chest. The rancher's presence moved nearby, steady as always, until something in the rhythm of the world slipped. She sensed it before she saw it, a change in the air, a pause where sound should have been. Her breath caught as his steps faltered, his confidence draining in seconds. She watched his body struggle to stay upright, his face losing color, his strength turning fragile right before her eyes. Time slowed, stretching each heartbeat into a painful echo. She knew what was coming before it happened, and the promise inside her tightened like a knot that he fell toward her space. Crossing the invisible line she had protected for years, an instinct battled memory inside her mind. The ground waited below him, unforgiving and final. While the ranch stood frozen in disbelief, she felt every eye turned toward her, but their stares meant nothing compared to the war inside her chest. Her past whispered warnings, reminding her why the rule existed, why touch had been forbidden for so long. Her body hesitated, muscles locked, hands trembling inches from him. In that suspended moment, she faced a choice she never expected, one that would define who she truly was. She could step back and remain safe, or step forward and risk breaking the promise that kept her whole. His breath came shallow, his fall unstoppable, and suddenly the rule felt smaller than the life fading in front of her. She moved before fear could decide, arms lifting, heart racing, and caught him with a strength she forgot she had. The impact shook her, but she held firm, grounding both of them against the world. She felt his weight, his warmth, his vulnerability, and something inside her shifted forever. The promise broke, not in failure, but in purpose, as she realized that sometimes survival means choosing compassion over protection. The rancher's presence had always carried weight without noise, a calm authority shaped by years of work and earned respect, and she felt it whenever he passed nearby. He was powerful in a way that did not need display, proud without arrogance, steady in storms others feared. He spoke when needed and listened when it mattered, and that balance made people trust him. She noticed how he never stared, never lingered, never tested the space she guarded so carefully, while others wondered about her. Silence, he accepted it as truth enough, offering courtesy without expectation. His respect was quiet, shown through distance kept and paths changed so she would never feel cornered. He treated her boundary like land marked sacred, not to be crossed, not to be questioned. She observed him from afar, aware of his strength and reputation, yet more aware of his restraint in a place where power often demanded control. His choice to step back spoke louder than command. That awareness unsettled her in ways she could not explain, because safety built on respect felt unfamiliar. She watched him work through long days, shoulders carrying responsibility without complaint, decisions made for the good of many rather than the pride of one. He led by example, not force, and the ranch followed his rhythm. She sensed that he noticed her too, not as a mystery to solve, but as a presence to honor. That understanding created a silent connection shaped by distance rather than closeness. It allowed her to breathe easier in shared spaces, knowing her rule would remain untouched. The ranch moved around them, animals calling, tools clanging, dust rising. Yet something unspoken held steady between them. She felt no pressure from him, no curiosity sharpened into intrusion, only a respectful acknowledgement that her story belonged to her alone. That kind of regard chipped gently at walls she never meant to lower, creating tension she did not welcome but could not ignore. She told herself it meant nothing. That respect was simply good manners. Yet her awareness followed him more than it should. When he spoke to others, his voice carried certainty, and she noticed how people leaned in, trusting his judgment without question. His pride came from duty fulfilled, not dominance claimed, and that distinction mattered more than she wished to admit. She kept her distance, reminding herself that admiration was not invitation, that noticing was not longing. Still, the air seemed different when he was near, steadier, as if chaos paused to listen. The rancher continued his work, unaware of the quiet shift he caused, honoring her limits without asking for explanation. That restraint built suspense in the ordinary moments, a fragile balance between two lives moving side by side without touching. She believed that balance would last, that respect would remain the strongest force between them, never guessing how quickly strength could falter or how soon. Fate would demand more than distance. The evening settled with a strange weight, the kind that pressed down without warning, and she sensed it while the rancher kept working past the point others would have stopped. He moved with determination, pushing his body harder than usual, finishing tasks meant for tomorrow, refusing rest as the sky slowly lost its color. Clouds gathered thick and low, dimming the light and muting the sounds around them, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She noticed his pace change, small signs only. Someone watching closely would catch a brief pause between steps, a hand resting longer than needed against a fence post. The air felt heavy, charged with something unseen, and the wind shifted without reason. She felt unease crawl through her chest, a quiet warning she could not explain that he lifted a load meant for two, muscles straining under effort, pride driving him forward while fatigue pulled him back. The sky darkened further, shadows stretching across the ground, swallowing familiar shapes, and turning routine into tension. She watched him straighten too slowly, his shoulders stiff, his breath uneven. Though he tried to hide it from those nearby, a flicker crossed his face. Not pain exactly, but strain pushed too far. She took a step forward, then stopped herself, reminding her feet of distance, reminding her heart of rules. He moved again, stubborn and focused, yet something in his balance faltered, just enough to make her pulse race. The sounds of the ranch faded into a dull echo as attention narrowed to him alone. His hands trembled slightly, unnoticed by others busy with their own work, but clear to her trained awareness. The clouds closed in, stealing the last warmth of the day, and a sudden silence spread, unnatural and sharp. He tried to speak, perhaps to call for help or dismiss concern, but the words never formed. His strength, once steady and reliable, slipped without mercy. draining from him in seconds. She saw his weight shift wrong, his footing betray him, and fear flashed through her chest before thought could stop it. The world seemed to tilt as he staggered, reaching for balance that no longer answered. She felt her breath lock, every instinct screaming that something had gone wrong beyond simple exhaustion. His knees weakened, pride dissolving into vulnerability, and the space between them closed faster than she could control. Time slowed to an unbearable crawl, each second stretching thin as glass. She could hear her own heartbeat louder than the wind. Louder than reason. He swayed once, then again, fighting gravity with failing strength, and she knew he would not recover on his own. The sky dimmed to near dusk, casting his face in shadow, hiding the fear he could no longer mask. Her body reacted before her mind allowed permission, muscles tensing, breath sharp, senses alert. The distance she guarded shrank dangerously as he began to fall toward her, and the certainty hit her like a wave that this moment would demand a choice she had never planned to face. The ranch stood on the edge of silence, unaware that everything was about to change. He collapsed without warning, his strength giving way completely as his body folded toward the ground near her, and the sound of his fall seemed to vanish before it reached the air. She stood frozen for a fraction of a second, watching the impossible happen in front of her as dust lifted around his boots and settled again. The entire ranch stopped moving, tools held midair, voices cut short, breaths suspended as every eye turned toward her. One shouted. No one rushed forward, because everyone knew what this moment meant, and no one dared to interfere. His body lay dangerously close, close enough to break the invisible boundary she had protected for years, close enough to force a choice she had never allowed herself to imagine. She felt the weight of attention press against her skin, heavier than any hand, sharper than any word. Her mind raced, caught between instinct and restraint, between the past she survived and the present unfolding without mercy. She could see his chest rise unevenly, hear the shallow struggle in his breath, and the reality of his condition struck her with sudden urgency. This was no simple stumble, no passing weakness, but something deeper, something threatening. She felt her pulse hammer as the ranch remained silent, waiting for her reaction as if the entire place had narrowed down to her next movement. Seconds dragged painfully, stretching longer than they should, and with each one his condition felt more fragile, her hands clenched at her sides, fingers tingling with the urge to act while her mind screamed caution. She remembered the rule that had kept her safe, the promise that defined her survival, and how carefully she had guarded it until now. That promise felt smaller with every shallow breath he took. She noticed his face, pale against the darkening ground, pride stripped away, leaving only a man in need. Her throat tightened, emotion rising uninvited, as memories she buried pressed against the present. The rancher had never crossed her limits, never demanded explanation, never tested her silence, and now he lay powerless at her feet. That truth cut deeper than fear. The ranch waited, not judging, not urging, simply watching, because they understood the weight of what she faced. She sensed that whatever she did next would be remembered long after this night ended. Her body leaned forward before permission formed, then stopped again, torn between retreat and reach. She felt the ground beneath her boots, solid and real, anchoring her to the moment. She could step back and remain untouched, or step forward and accept the consequences of breaking her own rule. His breath hitched, a faint sound that shattered her hesitation, and urgency surged through her veins. The silence broke inside her first, resolve rising stronger than memory, stronger than feared. As the ranch held its breath, she prepared to move, knowing that the moment she chose action, nothing about her life, or his, would remain the same. She stood caught in a storm that lived entirely inside her, torn between the pain she had buried for years and the man before her struggling to breathe, and the space around them felt too small for both truths to exist at once. Her hands trembled despite her effort to steady them, fingers shaking as memories rushed back, without mercy, sharp and unwanted. Images from long ago pressed into her thoughts, moments where trust had turned into damage, where closeness had cost her safety, and promises had been the only way to survive. She swallowed hard, chest tight, feeling that old fear rise like a shadow she thought she had outgrown, whispering that touch always carried consequences. She looked down at him, his face strained, eyes unfocused, pride completely gone, and the contrast shattered her defenses. This was not the past standing before her, but the present, raw and urgent, demanding action rather than reflection. Her breath came shallow as the weight of the choice settled fully into her body. She felt exposed, as if every scar she carried had been pulled into the open for the world to see. The ranch remained silent, but inside her mind, noise crashed endlessly, warning her to step back while another voice urged her forward. She remembered the promise she had made to herself, how it had given her control when everything else was taken, how breaking it felt like betrayal of the woman she became. That promise had protected her, shaped her strength, and allowed her to stand here now, steady and respected. Yet as she watched his chest struggle for air, she realized protection had also built walls she never questioned until this moment. Her hands hovered uselessly, caught between past and present, shaking with the weight of decision. She felt anger at fate for forcing this choice, fear of losing herself, and guilt for hesitating while a life hung in balance. The man before her had never demanded her trust, never pushed her limits, never taken what was not offered, and now he asked nothing even as his strength faded. That truth struck her deeper than memory. Her eyes burned as emotion rose, not weakness, but clarity, as she understood that the pain she carried did not have to decide who she was forever. She could honor her past without allowing it to rule every future moment. Her heartbeat slowed just enough for resolve to form, steady and deliberate. She inhaled, grounding herself in the present, feeling the earth beneath her boots, reminding herself she was no longer powerless. The trembling in her hands became controlled tension, fear reshaped into purpose. She leaned closer, no longer frozen, awareness sharpening as instinct replaced doubt. She knew the moment she acted would change something permanent inside her, yet she also knew walking away would leave a wound no promise could heal. His breath faltered again, fragile and uneven. Her hesitation dissolved. She accepted the cost of choice, understanding that courage was not the absence of fear, but movement through it. With one final breath, she allowed the past to loosen its grip, choosing life over memory, and prepared to reach forward, not as a victim of what was done to her, but as a woman deciding who she would be next. She moved at the breaking point where hesitation no longer had space to exist, stepping forward as his body tipped past balance and catching him before the ground could claim him, arms locking around his weight, with instinct sharper than fear. In that instant, her rule shattered quietly, not with chaos, but with purpose, as if it had been waiting for a moment that mattered enough. His body was heavier than she expected, solid and unguarded, and the force pulled her down a step, boots digging into the dirt as she fought to keep them both upright. The ranch gasped as one, stunned by what they saw, because no one had ever witnessed her touch a man, let alone hold one with such force. Her muscles burned, shoulders straining, yet she did not let go, refusing to release him even as her arms shook. She felt his breath against her, uneven and weak, and the reality of his vulnerability struck harder than any memory. Her strength surprised everyone, including herself, because it did not come from muscle alone, but from resolve built through survival. She adjusted her stance, grounding herself, shifting his weight carefully so he would not slip from her grasp. The world narrowed to the sound of his breathing and the steady beat of her own heart, loud and certain. Her past tried once more to pull her back, but it had lost its power the moment she chose action. She was no longer reacting to fear, she was responding to need. And that difference changed everything. The rancher's head fell against her shoulder, trust unconscious yet complete, and the weight of that trust settled deeply inside her. She felt exposed, raw, yet strangely steady, as if breaking her rule had not weakened her, but freed something long restrained. The ranch remained frozen, eyes wide, because they were witnessing more than a collapse. They were seeing a boundary dissolve with dignity. She tightened her hold, ensuring his body was supported, her movements careful and controlled despite the urgency. She called for help, with a firm voice that surprised even her, command carrying without panic, and the spell of silence finally broke. People rushed forward, but stopped short, unsure how close to come, reading her posture and understanding she had not released control. Her arms held him steady as others prepared to assist, and in that shared moment, respect deepened into awe. She realized then that strength did not always look like distance or restraint. Sometimes it looked like presence when it mattered most. She felt no regret, only clarity, because the rule she broke had served its purpose and no longer defined her. She had chosen compassion without surrendering herself, courage without losing control, and that balance reshaped her understanding of who she was. They carefully lowered him together. Her hands remained steady, touch no longer terrifying but intentional. The rancher stirred slightly, safe within her support, and the fear that once ruled her loosened its grip. The weight left her arms. Something remained behind, a quiet certainty that she had crossed a line not into weakness, but into truth, and nothing about her would ever return to what it had been before. As she held him, something shifted quietly between them, not loud enough to demand attention, but deep enough to change meaning. And the rancher felt it even through fading strength. His awareness flickered in and out, yet in those fragile moments, he understood that her touch was not simple contact. It carried the weight of pain endured, courage chosen, and mercy offered without condition. That he sensed restraint that had been surrendered deliberately, not weakness, but a gift given when it mattered most. Her arms were steady, protective rather than possessive, and that steadiness grounded him more than words could. The fear that had taken his body loosened as trust settled in, unspoken yet absolute, because he knew she would not have reached for him unless the moment demanded truth. The ranch watched in silence as understanding spread across his face, subtle but real, and their perception of her began to change before their eyes. She was no longer the distant woman defined by limits and quiet absence, but someone capable of stepping into fear and choosing compassion. The space around them softened as judgment dissolved into respect, and curiosity gave way to recognition. They saw how carefully she supported him, how her movements balanced strength and gentleness, and how control never left her hands. Her past remained unseen, but its presence was felt in the way she held herself, composed even while exposed. The rancher's breathing steadied slightly, responding to her calm, and in that exchange, a connection formed without demand or expectation. He did not see her as untouchable in that moment, but as brave, because bravery did not require explanation, only action. The ranch mirrored that realization, collective understanding settling where silence once stood. They recognized that distance had never been arrogance, and quiet had never meant coldness. That it had been protection, discipline, and survival, shaped by experiences no one had the right to question. Help gathered closer. They followed her lead without hesitation, trusting her judgment because she had earned it in seconds. She guided each movement, clear and composed, ensuring his safety while maintaining her dignity, and that balance left a lasting impression. The rancher felt gratitude rise beneath exhaustion, not for being saved alone, but for being trusted with her choice. Her courage had not erased her boundaries, it had redefined them, showing that strength could bend without breaking. They worked together. The air changed, lighter yet grounded, filled with respect rather than speculation. She felt the weight of eyes on her, but it no longer pressed uncomfortably, because she was no longer defending herself against misunderstanding. She had revealed nothing of her past, yet everything about her character stood visible. The ranch did not need explanation, because what they witnessed spoke clearly. She had faced fear and acted anyway, and that single decision reshaped how she was seen. The moment passed, but its impact settled deep, marking a shift not only in how others viewed her, but in how she understood herself. She was not defined by distance anymore, nor by the rules she once guarded so tightly. She was defined by the courage to choose mercy when it cost her comfort, and that truth stayed with her as the night closed in, steady and undeniable. That night changed both of them forever, leaving a silence filled with unspoken truths and emotions too deep for words. She stood alone under the darkened sky, heart still racing, realizing that the rules she had lived by for years had been broken not by weakness, but by courage. And in that act, she discovered a strength she never knew existed. The rancher's eyes met hers, gratitude and understanding reflected in their depths. And for the first time, she felt seen not as distant or untouchable, but as a woman capable of mercy, bravery, and love. Her past no longer held power to chain her, because in choosing to save him, she had stepped beyond fear and into freedom. The ranch, once silent and wary, now carried awe and respect, witnessing a transformation born of trust and human connection. She learned that healing sometimes begins where fear ends, and that moment lingered, eternal, shaping the rest of her life with courage, compassion, and the undeniable truth that some boundaries are meant to bend for what truly matters.